2022 is a big year for the state legislature as lawmakers reconvene during the ongoing COVID pandemic. They'll also have re-election on their minds. All seats in the House and Senate will be on the ballot this year because of reapportionment. We'll talk priorities for the new session, as well as public transparency and accountability with lawmakers from both parties and local journalists. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. The start of the new legislative session will look similar to last year in terms of pandemic safety measures and also similar in its jammed-packed agenda of hefty issues. Some are immediate, like the Red Hill fuel tank water crisis, COVID recovery efforts, and limiting the governor's emergency powers. Other matters are ones the state has grappled with for years: affordable housing, homelessness, and our high cost of living. So what can residents expect this year from their elected officials? Our panel tonight will give us some insight. We look forward to your participation as well in tonight's show. You can email or call in your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Democratic Representative Della Albilotti is the majority leader in the House. First elected in 2006, she currently serves District 24, which includes Makiki, Papakolea, McCully, and Manoa. Moana, that was a Disney show, sorry. The Maryknoll grad earned degrees from Princeton University and the William S. Richardson School of Law at the UH Manoa. Republican Val Okimoto is the minority leader in the House. She represents residents in District 36, which includes Mililani Mauka, Mililani, and Waipio Acres. Born and raised on Kauai, she's lived in Mililani for nearly 2 decades and worked as a special education teacher prior to being elected to office. Catherine Cruz is part of the news team as well as the host of The Conversation on Hawaii Public Radio. Originally from Guam, she earned a degree in broadcast journalism from San Francisco State University and has been a journalist in Hawaii since 1983. And Blaze Lovell is a reporter for Honolulu Civil Beat. Born and raised on Oahu, he's a Pearl City High School graduate and earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And Catherine, let me start with you. What do you think people can rightfully expect from this legislature? It's obviously an election year, pandemic year. What can they expect? What do you think they want?
Well, I think, they want to see some progress with those major issues that we've been dealing with, homelessness, affordable housing, dealing with over-tourism. Those are all things that we were grappling with, pre-pandemic. And, we're getting a taste of it as we start to see the visitors, return. And we're still trying to figure out, how are we going to make our way through this pandemic? How are we going to recover from this, major health and economic crisis? So I think we're looking for some leadership, some visionaries, I guess, to help guide us through, because it's been a long haul.
Yeah, Val Okimoto, minority leader in the State House. What are you hearing from your constituents about what they'd like?
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Daryl and PBS, for having myself and Representative Balali on, as well as the panel. I will say that I do agree with what Catherine said, but I think for the most part, my district really is just looking for help and guidance. They want to reinstate trust in government. And I think that's been lost over the last 2 years that we've been working with this COVID pandemic. I would love to see it, and the input I get is that they really would love to see the schools remain open, have our businesses stay open. But I think that all ties back into, can they trust the government, that elected officials that they put into office, to make the right decisions? That's something that's really important. Find that balance, definitely taking care of the public health and the safety of our communities, but find that balance to have our economy still blossom, not shutting it down, having our keiki still in school, because education is the future for our keiki and therefore the education, the future of our state. So that's some of the initiatives. I would love to see, again, that we kind of return back to some form of normal. That's what I'm hoping for, that we can discuss tonight, because we are now almost 2 years in, and we need to learn how to live with this virus.
Blaze Lovell from Civil Beat. What are the concerns that you're hearing out there, and what are you going to be focusing on in your coverage?
Carl, I think it's going to be a lot of the long-standing issues that Hawaii's been facing for years. I just moderated a panel quite like this, and people were sending us questions too, and they wanted to know what's going to happen with the minimum wage. They wanted to know how the state's going to better manage tourism. of course, Red Hill came up. And you know, and Sylbeat's been reporting on how a lot of families in Hawaii were already on the brink, you know, on the financial brink before this pandemic happened. A lot of experts out there are worried that they'll be worse off coming out of this pandemic. So for those families, you know, which are a lot in this state, I think they're going to be looking toward our lawmakers to see, you know, what help could be coming their way coming out of this pandemic once everything is starting to return to normal.
You know, Della Albilotti, the majority leader in the state house, are things back to normal or even close to it, especially when it comes to government? And what is the Capitol going to look like this year in terms of openness? One of my first questions that came in, why aren't they opening up the Capitol? Wouldn't it be nice to have this be the people's house again?
Thank you, Daryl, for the question, and thank you for having both me and Minority Leader here. I want to answer that question, but I want to answer the question you first asked, Representative Okimoto, which is, what are people saying to you out in the community? And we'll answer your question about how are we returning to normal. I sense a real tiredness, a real exhaustion with people. And I will say, I don't want to be a downer, because I want to go straight to the fact that I think we also have to have hope. And that what we're looking for, and what I think people are looking for, is one, government coming back and addressing those really tough issues, but helping us navigate a way back to that new normal. And I will share with you, 2 weeks before the end of the year, we were getting prepared to open up. And then Omicron, I can remember the caucus we had, and it was the day Omicron was just starting to peak on the news. And we said, we're going to open up, but we're watching this Omicron, and we just don't know what's going to happen. And so we were ready to open, and it was such a hard decision to close. And I know that people in the last week, my kids are at public school. I know Representative Okimoto's kids are also at public school. People are scrambling now, and they're tired. They're tired of the open and close, and who's been exposed. I have to go get a test. I have to run this down. And so people are looking for normality. I think we're going to have to get through this rough period, because the virus is still in some ways controlling us. But we have the measures to take back a little bit of that control through the mitigation efforts we're taking, through all of the people who are getting vaccinated and boosted. And we're going to get back to normal because we have to. We don't have another federal stimulus that's going to provide us a lifeline. We have to get on to economic recovery. And in some ways, here are the bright spots. I have never been in a session where we have $1 billion that could be potentially put into the rainy day fund. So I think we have some opportunities. And on the House side, we have members who have been working on these very tough issues that Blaze and Catherine have talked about: homelessness, managing tourism. Now, in the last month of the last year, we now have to deal with an economic contamination prevention and treatment issue. So there's all of these big things, and I want to talk about that, because I think we're going to tackle all of those issues and provide that hope and leadership that Catherine was talking about.
Catherine, what do you think are the questions that the public will have, and do you think the public has any confidence that the legislature can do anything about the pandemic?
Well, you know, it was interesting, just on the opening of the legislature, I was talking to the DAG's comptroller, Kurt Odegoro, and he told me basically that, yeah, they were set to go, like Della mentioned. They had actually hired extra security guards. They were going to actually run them through, I think tomorrow, a run through, you know, to test people, to look at people's vaccination cards, that kind of thing. But because of, you know, the variant, they had to make a decision, you know, to shut down for now and just, you know, see how it goes. But they do plan to open. I did happen to see a note from the governor who, you know, sent down a notice to leadership saying, you know, he's advised his department heads to basically attend meetings remotely, just because of the, you know, severity and the highly contagious variant. And I don't know so much if it's the health part of it, but more on the isolation, you know, and the shortages that we're seeing. So if you get all these Capitol workers and lawmakers and their staff out, then the people's work doesn't go anywhere, you know. So yeah, you know, access. So I think being able to go down there and talk to the lawmakers and have your voice be heard.
Val Okimoto, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to agree. When Representative Baladi said that the people are tired, they are. We're all exhausted. And I think one thing when I talk about trust in government, we really need to start understanding, like Majority Leader said, we have to get a new normal. But when the goalpost keeps moving, our people are tired of hearing we reach this percentage of vaccination rates, then we release all restrictions, or after 2 weeks we flatten the curve. They're tired of hearing that. We really need to understand that we can't have this continuation of the goalposts moving. That's not realistic. And just like Catherine shared, the public deserves to have the Capitol open. We went through now 2.5 sessions, or I'm sorry, 1.5 sessions, I think, with the building completely closed. And we are, we are the beauty of our Capitol is that it's open aired, and we allow access, not just to lobbyists or special interest groups, but to the people. And I dare say that if we as a legislature can't have another session where the public is allowed in, then maybe we should adjust the calendar to when they are allowed in, because this is a huge year. It's an election year, but also we are now 2 years after the pandemic started. We need to be able to step up and, like Della said, offer some kind of hope for the future. But we can't do that if we're not allowing the people to even have access to us.
So can I jump in here, Daryl? I know you want to say, but I want to jump in here, Daryl. We are going to be looking at reopening. So the policy is not a hard and fast, it's subject to review. And I think that's what I'm really hoping for, because we know that we need to open up. I think the other silver lining is that we can pivot and be more accessible online. So even when we were going to open, another really bright spot was that we were still going to be a hybrid system, because one of the lessons learned, and I think I can bring Blaze into this, one of the lessons learned is that people from the neighbor islands really like the virtual testimony and the ability to access us online. And I think so. I'm a big proponent that we do need to open up, and when we can do that safely, we're going to review that, and I hope that we will be able to in February or late January.
Blaze, it's interesting. I'm seeing a little bit of a partisan divide here. What's your take on the politics of the coronavirus as it's playing out in Hawaii in particular? What do you think?
Well, it's kind of interesting, Daryl, because, Hawaii tends, or at least I think we tend to think of Hawaii as being, a majority Democratic state. If you go on the mainland, they'd say that it's deep blue. But I think for anyone here, you realize that, it's a lot of different shades of purple, too. And there's a lot of different views out there on what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing for it. And in many ways, it mirrors a partisan divide you see on the mainland over vaccine mandates and other kinds of business mandates. Republicans tend not to agree with those. If you tend to lean Democratic, you might be more willing to accept that. But I think I'd agree with everyone that, there's a certain, I think like the rest of the country, we're kind of hitting a certain point where people are going, when is this going to end? And, are we going to continue to have these mandates? Is the government going to let up? On the other end of the spectrum, you might be seeing, thousands of cases a day and wondering why the mayors aren't doing more to restrict these kinds of gatherings. So I think what's happening right now in Hawaii is really just mirroring a lot of what's happening everywhere.
Representative Okimoto, do you feel like the Capitol should be open, should be open to the public right now? Is that an argument going on now between the minority and the majority?
Well, Della and I don't argue, first of all. We respectfully discuss things. And that's, I think, the beauty of having partisan, respectable conversations. I do believe that now that we've kind of gone, again, like I said, years into this, and we recognize that with Omicron, it's highly transmissible, it spreads fast, but the result is that, our hospitalization rates are so low. I think the staffing is the issue that's causing the concern there. But I do think that we should open up. And if we feel that it's too much of a health risk for our communities, because that's very important to me, then we as a legislature need to decide when is it okay to open up, and we won't meet until we can do that, because it's not fair to the people. I agree. Like you said, Daryl, in the intro, I am from the neighbor island, Kauai. And so I know that the neighbor islands, it's a struggle for them to come here and testify. So we give them that option. We allow the hybrid. But to close the building completely, where now our communities can't have access to us, it's very difficult. And you know, I'm grateful that my first session in 2019, I was able to go through a regular session where the building was open and people were able to come in and testify. I was able to see that. There's a beauty to that I really miss. And I actually know that Rep. Bellotti misses it too. So we need to have that interaction. We need access. And the people aren't going to trust us if we continue to make decisions behind closed doors in a closed building that should be for the people.
Okay, let me start moving on to other things. I'm starting to get questions on specific issues that I would want to be driven by our viewers very much. I want to mention that Ellie from Nu'uanu was the one that asked about the Capitol, and I appreciate that question. Couple of questions about the minimum wage. And I'm curious about both the minimum wage and also other labor-oriented things like paid sick leave and so on. And Catherine, what are you hearing about the prospects for those issues?
Oh, I think it's going to be pretty good for minimum wage. I think the question is just how much. I was surprised to see last night I got a late night or early morning email about a new progressive caucus. And, you know, that was one of the things on their agenda. And I think there was another caucus, so I'm trying to think, working families, same thing, minimum wage. You know, I think this pandemic has certainly showed us that, you know, without workers, things shut down. You know, we can't function, and we need to raise the pay for those folks because the cost of living is just, you know, it's going through the roof, and people are really struggling.
You know, Della Bellotti, we've been on the verge of raising the minimum wage. I know it did get raised 3 or 4 years ago, I think. But do you see the business community, and I'd like to have Representative Okimoto respond to this too, do you see the business community recognizing the writing is on the wall finally on this, or do you see a big pushback again on minimum wage?
So I just want to put this in a little bit of context. Actually, at the beginning of this pandemic, we were set to raise the minimum wage. And then we paused it because of the extreme distress that small businesses were going and feeling in 2019 and 2020 and into 2021. I think part of it is, yes, you know, we're seeing the market and we're seeing that more businesses can handle the increases in the minimum wage. But I think I really want to stress, and there's a lot of people calling for the increase. So, you know, there's still going to be a discussion about what that minimum wage looks like, because we also have to think about the other ways in which we help working families. And I think that progressive caucus that you're talking about, Catherine, you know, it's really focused on the well-being of working families and all of the other things that can contribute to it, whether it's looking at the EITC or looking at the low-income housing credit or the renter's credit, or looking at affordable housing, the cost of childcare. There's all of these levers that we can press to help address costs of living, and there's an opportunity to do that. So it's going to be about minimum wage, but it's going to be about all of these other things as well.
Let me, before I put this directly to Representative Okimoto, Ingrid at Facebook has a specific question: gradually or in one step, or do you support tying it to the cost of living so people are not at the mercy of waiting for the legislature? Val Okimoto, what's the position of the minority on this?
I want to say that one thing that I think we really need to define and differentiate is the difference between minimum wage and a living wage. When I got my first job, I think when I was in high school, you get an entry-level position as a high school student or a college, you know, student visiting home as minimum wage. It's entry-level positions. That's a different thing from living wage. And I think we need to really understand that when we're talking about living wage, yes, for people who have careers or jobs where they need to support a family, that's different completely. Now, since my first session in 2019, minimum wage has been a part of the discussion. And I think if we just discuss and only address minimum wage by itself, we're never going to really address the issue, which is the high cost of living here. People aren't leaving just because of the minimum wage and because they're not getting paid enough. They're leaving them for different reasons, but we need to really address high cost of living. We have an issue with our supply chain. Right now, we're telling our businesses they can only operate at half capacity. And, you know, we have a high inflation rate right now. These are all issues that need to be discussed, not just minimum wage. So if you just raise it, again, for entry-level positions, that's what the minimum wage is, then the business owner or the private sector, whoever the business will have to either pass that cost down to the consumer, which is us, or they have to automate things, which again affects the workforce, and now people are out of jobs, or they shutter their doors. And so it's a mathematical thing for me, but I think we need to really discuss the whole picture. You're just raising the wages there's a difference again. I think we need to differentiate between minimum wage for entry-level jobs and living wage.
Okay, let me ask Blaze Level, what do you, how do you handicap this one? And also, I'd like to ask about paid family leave or paid sick leave, which Hawaii is one of the states that doesn't require that.
So to handicap minimum wage, I do think it does have pretty good chances. We've already seen the House Speaker say that he plans to come forward with a proposal. In the past, in fact, last year, the Senate voted on a minimum wage increase that went over to the House, but I don't think the House at that time was ready. It seems now that both chambers are going to find an agreement. I agree with Catherine that I think the one question now is like how much and how are you going to raise it? I've heard there's some discussion of tying it to the consumer price index so that as the cost of living goes up, the wages also increase. And I also agree with Val that, it's not just going to be the minimum wage, but I've been hearing from lawmakers that those other facets, affordable housing and everything else is going to get a look at, because we know that, the things that drive people away from Hawaii and drive population decline, people, look at the wages, they look at job opportunities, and they look at the price of housing, and that kind of determines whether or not they decide to stay here.
Let me move on to economic diversification.
Daryl, can I
yes, Catherine,
add something in here? Just as the pandemic was starting, I was asked to participate in the Consumer Price Index survey, which was a real eye-opener. The Census Bureau contacted me, and so I had to, save all my receipts and report it, what I bought, and it was a real eye-opener. So it was just really interesting to have that experience at the beginning of the pandemic, and then now coming out, 2 years later, as we've had these supply and demand issues and disruptions just because of the shortage of workers. Gosh, you just go and you get a plate lunch now, it's like a plate lunch is more than minimum wage in some places. So it was just an interesting experience, just looking back to actually take stock of what you're paying for.
So Majority Leader Bellotti, then, what is the package? I mean, what do you see coming out of this legislature in regard to improving people's way of life, dealing with the cost of living? I mean, we're seeing the inflation right now. We're seeing inflation in housing prices. Clearly minimum wage isn't the panacea. We've been talking about that. What do you do about the high cost of living in this state? And I've got a number of questions for people asking about diversification. Casey on email, what are the new plans built to diversify the economy and grow modern, higher income jobs for youth and local communities? These are really big, complicated issues. And do you see this legislature being really able to tackle those in a comprehensive basis?
I think we are. We are going to work on, again, looking at well-being for working families. And, you talked about paid family leave. Dara, I want to hook into that because I think one of the challenges we've had is we have been watching what the federal government has been doing. And one of the biggest things that's helped tackle cost of living was the child tax credit. So there are things still in play. And I would say that I was looking to the federal government to address the paid family leave issue. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that at the state level, but here's how we can help with early childcare. Last year, we passed a framework that would allow us to do it better with early childcare, and we were anticipating some of the movement that would happen at the federal level. Well, we can continue to build on that effort and look at ways that we can drive down early childcare costs, because we know that that's one of those cost drivers for working families. On the issue of affordable housing, we have this opportunity, right, with the revenues that we have coming in. So we have on the House side, Chair Nakamura, who's looking at the range of things that we can do to address the supply issue at various levels. And there's this opportunity to address the waiting list for DHHL. There's all of these things that we can do. And we have to, affordable housing is a tough nut to crack, but we're going to continue to address that. There's lots of other things that are impacting cost of living. And let me go back to one last thing, and then I'll stop because I could go on and on. Living wage jobs is absolutely where we have to focus on things. And so I think the things that we have been pushing, early college, college promise, all of those things that are driving people into those high paying jobs. I said this to Blaze earlier. We have Queens and HPH that are expanding their campuses. We know there's a workforce healthcare shortage. We know there's shortages in cybersecurity. These are all these high paying jobs that we need to start funneling our residents towards. And I think part of the interesting thing that happened during this pandemic was there was a lot of industry, cross-industry collaboration. So I'm looking forward to working with HAH because we know that there's a need for healthcare workers at all levels of, and so that's the living wage jobs. I think those are the kinds of things that you're going to see us working on.
Let me ask Val Okimoto, the minority leader, to respond to that. We're hearing a tax credit here, we're hearing a child, education here, free, preschool. We're hearing this here, a long list of things. But really, don't we need to take some big, wide umbrella kind of steps to address? And what do you think those might be that would actually drive things toward a different place?
Great question. And as I look back on just, the last 3 years of being in office, I feel like, oh my gosh, I think even Della said last year, like it was in her, she'd been in longer than me, like we had been through so much. I feel like I have had a crash course of experiencing a plethora of things since I've been elected into office. And I think, when we talk about economic development, one thing I've heard repeatedly is diversifying the economy. We talk about our economic driver, which is tourism. But one of the main reasons, along with other things that we've discussed tonight, that we're losing our local residents because there's not enough economic opportunities for growth. They need opportunities here to be able to support themselves. And so I think we should support local development. We need to invest in the future, in our communities, create jobs, whether it's housing projects so that we can address the housing issue. Or I think the majority is talking about the P3 today, public-private partnerships. We need to have something to give, again, opportunities for growth. We need to invest in the future. I think I was a teacher and I still, teach in the classroom when I can substitute. And one of my favorite things is just seeing the potential that our keiki have. And so if we're not creating opportunities for them in the future, then what kind of future are we leaving for them and ourselves? So I think, we have an amazing construction workforce here. We need to allow jobs for our local residents here, having projects that can be developed to not only provide jobs, but future opportunities so that our local residents don't have to feel like they have no options here and then be forced to leave. One of the reasons I ran for office, really, after I became a parent, I recognized, oh my gosh, what kind of future am I leaving for my children? And I felt like I had to step up and do something to create some kind of future for them here in the state that I love.
Exactly. So, Blaze Level, where do you see the conflict here? I mean, you were hearing a lot of ideas. What's the main conflict you see in the legislature over this issue? What is it that prevents us from successfully driving economic development? What's the conflict of the legislature over that?
Daryl, and you've covered the building for a number of years too. Diversifying the economy is something we hear every single year, and it got brought up even more after tourism got knocked out and the local economy tanked. I think it's not just what's happening in the capital, though. Too, it's there's more factors than just the politics of what's going on. The economists here have said that we want to diversify the economy, but that's not going to be something that can happen overnight. It took decades to get away from big agriculture before tourism took over. And, it's like the guys at UH have said, it's probably going to take just as long to, get away from tourism and build that next leg of, our economic stool to prop us up. That being said, I think there could be some movement in the near term to get that process going. It's just over, how do we want to do that and which industries do we want to go after?
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
I really want to jump in here because I love some of the economic work that the university is doing and what's happening UH brought out Kate Raworth. She is an economist from Britain who talks about circular economics. and regenerative economics. And I think there's a very interesting conversation happening on right now amongst the Aloha Aina groups, the Aloha Aina futures groups. And so when you talk about circular economies and how do we have regenerative tourism, right? We know that tourism is going to be and continue to be a major stool, a major pillar in our economy. But the conversation that we had during the pandemic was, how do we have regenerative tourism? How do we have tourism that contributes to Hawaii? How can we better manage tourism so that our communities are not in conflict with the tourists? And so there's a very interesting thing happening. We started it last year. We're giving tools to the communities and to agencies like DLNR to do things like dynamic pricing so that we can control and manage tourism better. And so this kind of feeds into this notion of a regenerative tourism economy, green fees. How do we make this work for us better? I'll even shift this, Blaze, to what you're talking about, big agriculture. We are seeing local food production becoming critical. We know how critical that was towards us during this pandemic. Now, are we gonna, in the blink of an eye, go from, robust seed corn companies to all local food production? No, it's gonna be a parallel development. But again, I think it's where we invest our monies in. And last year we set the stage, setting goals for our Department of Education, for PSD, for our hospitals, for food production and consumption and purchasing. And so we have to keep driving that. So I think I'm also interested in what we're going to potentially do for food sustainability and all of those big issues. When we address issues about food sustainability and we're looking at more local food production, we're also addressing the issue of climate change, because the better agricultural practices we have here, the more carbon sink we have. So that's a good thing.
Okay, now I got to stop you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, because I want to honor our viewers by asking these questions. Linda from Pearl City, I'm 80 years old. I go to the market and I can barely afford groceries. The prices keep rising. How will people on fixed income afford the rising prices? Now, just the other day, there was a ProPublica article that said the state of Hawaii is hoarding basically its welfare money by letting it stack up in the budget. The federal money comes in and it just stacks up to, I think, a $350 to $400 million surplus. Catherine, what do you think might happen this year to actually adjust these people like Linda who just can't afford to get by? They need direct financial assistance, more direct financial assistance. Catherine, do you see any will at the legislature for something like that?
I don't know, but on the public radio, I talked to a number of small businesses, small farmers, folks who are really trying to work on that sustainability goal, to produce the food that we need to eat. And I think during this pandemic, we certainly saw all the Aloha folks were, we'll buy your produce, we'll give it to people who really need it. And so, yeah, my heart goes out to that senior on a fixed income, because what do? You eat less, or you look for the bargains or the seconds, and if you're eating produce that's grown here in Hawaii, it's fresher, it's better for you, it tastes better. I had some local celery and I was just like, wow, this is like awesome.
Let me ask Representative Okimoto, on this subject about direct aid to people and welfare. I know we don't call it welfare anymore. I think that's the term people use. $1 billion surplus we're looking at least, maybe even more. What do you think? Do you think that $1 billion should be recirculated back into people and in the economy, or do you think it should be put away for a rainy day, which seems to be, an opinion of some lawmakers?
Yeah, I want to say I listened to part of Majority Leader and Blaze actually on their Civil Beat Facebook panel today, and so they talked about the $1 billion surplus, which was nice to hear because just last year we had a $2 billion deficit. But I think we need to address things. I am one that I understand the need for government assistance, but I think that should be regulated better. Definitely in the case of our Kupuna, we need to make sure. I mean, they spent their lives, contributing to our economy and to us as the future of the state, but we need to take care of them. Some things, that we could really address or maybe discuss is maybe exempting certain things like produce, the GET from those things. I really trying to address things at the ground level versus just abstract. We need to have concrete things that we can tell our constituents, we're going to do this. We're going to eliminate the GET from our produce or from your buying of foods, your groceries, medications. Those are things that I know our Kupuna rely on. I mean, I rely on it as a mom. So our everyday purchases and things that we need to survive on, that's one thing. I'm not against offering assistance, but I think that there needs to be guidelines and it should never be something that's never ending. And we all know that there's stories of the welfare system being misused, and we need to really manage that so that the people that really need it are getting the resources that they need. I would love to see some of our surplus money going to still fixing the roads, fixing our making sure that we have water, the everyday things that we use and need in our lives. That's something that I think should also be addressed. We could use the money towards that as well.
Blaise, you've been covering the legislature long enough to have seen people talk about tax relief and tax reform, only to see it go by the wayside. What's the problem that you see with the legislature in dealing with big fundamental issues like, oh, why don't we cut the 4% off of food or 4% off of drugs or 4% off of rent, for example, especially when we have a big surplus? Do you see any prospect of something like that happening this year?
There in the last couple of years, we see bills that, bring up those issues that look to axe the GET on medical supplies, things like food. I've seen a bill to cut the GET on school supplies and those things that you have to routinely buy. They never get through, though. And I can't remember exactly, but I kind of recall one of the arguments against them being is that there's already a lot of GET exemptions that the State Department of Taxation reports out every year. And it's a pretty big sum on what, gets exempted. I think the reasoning behind that is so that you don't end up with a tax pyramid where, you end up taxing the sale of some kind of item multiple times. But that could be an issue as to why, those tax exemptions don't get through.
Okay, so Representative Albilotti, why not cut the excise tax on rent? I have to pay that bill on a rental house in the next 10 days. I mean,
so I think we are going to be looking at tax relief proposals. I don't know that eliminating the GET or reducing the GET on certain specialty items is the way to go, precisely because of what Blaise says, is that there are already many exemptions. I think what we're looking at are things like the earned income tax credit. So when you talk about getting money into working families' pockets, those are the kinds of measures. And that the earned income tax credit is actually at the federal level. It was a bipartisan effort. I think it was actually a Republican idea initially. And so there's other tax relief proposals that we can look at. The renter's credit, again, the food credit. Those are the kinds of things that I think we're going to be looking at in terms of tax relief. Now with Kupuna services, and I have to apologize, I need to circle back with our Kupuna caucus conveners. But Hawaii has had Kupuna Care and Kupuna Caregiver services that have continued even through the pandemic. And so we have long done a good job of trying to assist Kapuna who especially are in need. And so we're gonna have to revisit those programs as well and see how they're doing to make sure that the need is being addressed through the programs we already have.
Okay, so let me throw out this one because
Daryl, can I say, 30 seconds, I just want to add, is that okay, Daryl? Sorry.
Sure.
You asked earlier about the, should we put the surplus, what should we do with it? I think one thing I've heard repeatedly in the last 2 years, definitely a year and a half, with the rainy day fund is, unlike probably many people that have experienced in their lives, this is a rainy day, it's rainy. I mean, when the economy shut down and we were at a standstill, government had nothing coming in because there was nothing coming into the state. That to me qualifies for a rainy day. And so I think in many ways, we need to really address that because of what happened in the last year and a half, we are in a dire situation where many people, like you mentioned, that Kupuna who called in, they're in need of support now. So if there's a rainy day, it is now. That's what I wanted to add in.
Okay, so we've got about 15, 20 minutes left, and so I want to get to some of the tougher issues here. Jacob in Facebook, in 2021, Hawaii was rated by Wallet Hub as ranking 40 out of 50 in terms of educational quality. How will the state strengthen educational quality and outcomes? Let me start with Representative Okimoto. I mean, you mentioned, and both you and Della are public school parents. What needs to be done? I mean, the school system right now is struggling with COVID. Is it the way the system is run, or are they underfunded?
I think it's a mixture of things, a combination of things. I like you mentioned, I was a special education teacher. Both Della and I have kids in the public school system. I went to public school, and I still teach when I can. You know, the schools are working really hard with what they're given. And I know in the very beginning, it was very challenging because what they were told, you know, everything was based on what the DOH was giving to them down to and HSTA was kind of, you know, implementing or affecting. We need to really, at this point, understand that the best way to service any kind of future is to make sure that our keiki are getting educated. And I know, and I'm proud of the schools that my daughters go to, because it's not perfect. You can't stop the virus from spreading, and we know that now 2 years later. But we can do everything we can to make sure that if our child is going to school, they're not showing symptoms. If the teachers are having symptoms, they're not going to school. So that they can mitigate things. Right now, my third grader is in a bubble where she only plays with people in her class, which makes me a little sad, but at least she can be in school. So when we talk about really the future, we have to, first of all, make sure that our keiki are in school, because our testing assessment levels have dropped. And really, the last year and a half was a disservice to our keiki because they didn't get the education they deserved.
Catherine, you've covered this issue enough. What is the problem with the way the public school system is funded and treated by the legislature, in your opinion?
Well, you know, you remember what it was like when we had the walkout, the strike. You know, that was just that was a horrible time for everybody. Yeah, and you know, the teachers, and we look at the shortages that we're seeing in the classroom. You know, I think it is time for them to get a raise. You're talking about a working wage, and you know, their salaries are, you know, among the lowest in the country, and we've got, you know, a really high cost of living here. So I think this is the year that you're going to see some of those raises. I mean, you know, we've heard over the years all these different ideas about how to fund public education, but I think that they have to, you know, retain teachers. They have to attract new teachers and support the ones that are in there, and pay them, because, you know, they're raising our keiki. Know teaching the future generation. So I think you've got to do something for that segment.
Della, you know, we know you don't control how much the teachers are paid. That's not the legislature. That's between the union and the Board of Education, or the Department of Education. I'm sure if you threw a lot of money at them, they might feel more comfortable offering raises and so on, and that is often run out of the governor's office and so on. But what do you see the legislature doing this year to start moving the needle on public education?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I think our education chair has been focusing on quality education. You know, that's about supporting the teachers, moving the programs that they're doing, you know, looking at computer literacy and all of these other things that we need to do. I think it's about investing in the schools. You know, we saw that they needed a tremendous amount of assistance to go virtual, and that's only going to persist. So those kinds of infrastructure needs in schools are also something that we have to address. But here's another thing. As we address the cost of living issues for everybody, that's also addressing the cost of living issues for teachers as well. So I hope we're going to at some point be talking about more workforce housing development. You know, not just the housing development for the affordable rentals, which we have put in a lot of money into that arena of development, but we have to look at more, how are we going to do affordable housing, again, across the spectrum. And in that way, that's going to be another thing that we hopefully, you know, in addition to salaries that might, you know, again, that's what the governor can do, right? And through collective bargaining. we have to look at the other levers of cost of living to help teachers. And so that I think housing may be a piece of it as well at some point.
You know, a couple of questions. One from Paul on Facebook. Legalize recreational cannabis, tax it, use those tax dollars to fund DOE. And another one, why can't we be like California? CBD revenue and health benefits. Blaze, what's your handicap on that, on perhaps recreational and taxing marijuana?
There, I think the first session I covered, that was the first story I wrote, will Hawaii legalize marijuana? And it still hasn't happened, though. People try every year to get that passed. I think this year the Progressive Caucus plans to introduce a bill that will legalize, recreational pot. But just based on what happened before, I don't see Pakalolo getting legalized anytime soon.
Real quickly, Representative Bellotti, give me 10 seconds on recreational marijuana.
I don't know that that's going to rise to the level of something that we're going to tackle this year, but I know that there are progressives who are very interested also in that.
Okay, so I want to throw out an issue that I'm interested in, and I haven't gotten a question on it, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. But, this issue about using the stadium property for affordable housing instead of a big stadium, you've got several governors basically saying that makes much more sense. Have UH have a stadium somewhere else. It doesn't really have to be at Manoa. It could be at West Oahu. But I'd like Val Kumoto, first of all, what do you think? Do you think that we should be spending $350 billion on a stadium, given the circumstances that we're in?
I'm going to take a quick liberty to take my 10 seconds to answer the marijuana thing, because I think that going back to that, no matter what we do, the DOE actually gets 1/8 of our state budget. I think it's about 1/8, $2 billion. So I think it's not just an issue of how much money we throw at it or give to them. It's about managing the money that they get. And I do believe that we need to fund education completely. But we're one of the, I'm not sure of how many other states are like ours, where we have one Department of Education for the entire state. And so I feel that we need to really take away waste from the DOE and manage that money better. Because no matter what we legalize or tax and give into the education system, if we can't manage the money properly, it's never going to be solved. Okay, so my focus again would not. I support teachers, and it's just I don't think that raising wages is what's going to answer the question and answer the issue. Lowering the cost of living and other issues that we talked about, it needs to be addressed as well. Now you talked about the stadium. I stated before that I'm for creating jobs for our local residents, and that was a hard decision that we voted on with the stadium, because it is a lot of money, and as a fiscal conservative, I don't like to easily agree to things that will spend our taxpayer dollars. But like was mentioned earlier, I think we need to really figure out a way to, in more than just a stadium, but in other areas where we can have a private-public partnership for things that are necessary for the entire state to use, from the high school level to the college level, that we can invest wisely in that. I know the stadium right now, the goal was to have it along the rail so that we can have the housing and job opportunities. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but while I cringe at the price tag, I think if we could keep it to what we agree on and not have, a bottomless pit of expenditures, then it's an investment that the state can and can benefit from.
Della Bellotti, quickly on the stadium.
I think we just came from that conversation, Blaze, and I think, there's a lot of concerns. And so there's going to be a lot of conversation around it. Should it just all be affordable housing? I don't think that's the solution either. It's supposed to be a place, and the area legislators have wanted it to be a place of an economic engine, right? Can you have that multi kind of use place, a combination of tourism and sports. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of conversations around that as well.
Catherine
and Daryl.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Real quick, I know you've got House representation here tonight. The Senate did put out a list of their priorities, and on there specifically is the entertainment district there at the stadium. So that's one of their priorities for sure.
But you did a great show. I was listening to it with the governors about this very issue. How did you come away from hearing their opinions? Do you feel that this is something that should be relooked at again?
Well, it's interesting, even with the Red Hill developments, it makes you just wonder, about that area and the vulnerability of that area and those plans. And if fuel gets into, our drinking water for the larger part of Honolulu. How does that affect development? How will the stadium, plans, will that go by the wayside? All the other large capital improvements that folks, want to see. So yeah, it is worth picking up and turning the stone over. What is the best way forward?
Let me ask, this is Becky via email says, dealing with mental health to really address the reality people are sadly choosing to live in our parks. It's just wrong for such a wealthy state to have people doing their laundry in fountains and not having access to places to leave their human waste. It's not housing as some don't want to be housed, it's mental health. Della Bilotti, I mean, you were the health chair previously. Have we done enough? I mean, it just seems like homelessness and mental illness is still in our face all the time.
Yeah, that is one of the toughest nuts to crack. And I would say that, the things that we've been doing with Ohana zones, housing first, wraparound services, those things actually helped us during the pandemic. And so we know that, I think it was 3 years ago that we first invested in Ohana zones. So we're going to have to come back and relook at those things and fund those things that worked. I would also say that, mental health, it's not just mental health in adults. One of the things I've been very concerned about, and it's the mental health of our students, of our children. This pandemic has really affected them tremendously. I shudder to think what the suicide rates may be and what we're seeing. And so we really have to double down on this issue, mental health across for the homeless population, but also for just people generally, because I think people are struggling.
Another question, Blaze, you want to, I keep asking you the handicap stuff, but do you think that they could do anything about the fireworks? This is from Jackie from Kapuna. What's the legislature could do about fireworks? I mean, is there even a solution anywhere nearby for that?
I don't think anything's going to move, but I mean, we do know a couple of things that they could do if the state wanted to crack down, on fireworks. It's an idea that's been floated in years past, and that's inspecting the containers down at the docks, because that's how these types of fireworks get in. But whenever bills come up in the legislature, Matson and the ILWU comes out in opposition to it, and the bill doesn't happen. I think the last time they pushed for that, Matson was saying that it would slow down operations at the dock. But it's funny because we were just talking about this in the office the other week. It's like the number one issue. You see hand wringing over every New Year's Eve, but the police don't step up to push forward these bills, and we don't see any stronger enforcement measures. So I just don't see anything on the horizon to tap down on fireworks.
Okay, we got about 3 minutes to go, and so I'm hesitant to throw this out, but it is kind of a big issue. I'll put it to Della Bilotti. The Supreme Court kind of tossed you guys a curveball by saying you can't gut and replace bills anymore. How is that going to crimp your ability to respond to new things that happen during the session? Only got time for about a minute's long answer.
We're going to deal with that, and I think for the House, germaneness is the issue, right? So we are going to look at how we use our short form bills, because that's typically been the way in which we've had to use the technique we use to deal with emergencies. And so I think it's really going to be about bill management, idea management, how you're moving your ideas through the legislature, and we're going to work with it. We're going to work with the Supreme Court's decision. They've made a ruling, and we're going to, for the most part, House rules have really tried to comply and make sure all of those, timelines were hit and met to provide public access and transparency and review and all that kind of testimony and that kind of involvement with the public.
Val Locomotor, really briefly, what do you think that's going to change things at the legislature?
I'm hoping it changes a lot. I understand the initial reason for, when there is an emergency and our communities need financial assistance. But over the years, definitely this practice has been misused by the legislature. And I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning. We really need to just reinstate somehow the trust of the people in us. And by avoiding this type of practice of gut and replace, where a bill is given a blank title, relation to education or something, where and then it completely changes over the course of the legislative session. We really need to be honest and transparent. And a part of that really is making sure that the public knows what we're doing, not rushing legislation, not quickly getting things snuck behind closed doors, because that's not ever going to be something that will allow the public to trust us. And we really need that at this time.
Okay, great. And, we pretty much run out of time. I do want to, on that subject, put in a plug for the legislative website. It is really pretty good, folks. You could go back and watch hearings that took place months ago. You could watch hearings in real time. And some of them are pretty interesting. My colleagues laugh at me when I say that, but they're pretty interesting. You can get your word in. It's way better than it's ever been. So just Google Hawaii State Legislature. It will come up. I highly endorse it. And now I got to wrap it up. I want to say mahalo to all of you folks at home for joining us tonight, and we want to thank our guests, Democratic House Majority Leader Della Albilotti, Minority Leader in the House, Republican Representative Val Okimoto, journalist Catherine Cruz with Hawaii Public Radio, and Honolulu Civil Beat reporter Blaze Lovell. Next week on Insights, Maui County voters will decide the fate of a number of proposed changes to the Maui County Charter in this year's election. Among the ballot amendments, reworking how council members are elected and increasing hiring requirements for future Maui police chiefs. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.